What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today, as you can tell by the title, we are back with another updated hero guide, this time focusing on Rey. A few months back now, I did do a poll to see if you guys wanted to see all of the hero guides get updated, which, as you can see by the result, was a pretty resounding yes, and my last Rey guide came out in about Feb of 2019, so I thought it was about time she got an updated version. Now, you can see on screen what we're going to be going through in this video. We'll of course start off with her base stats, then go through and break down all of her abilities, and then I will touch on some tips for both Galactic Assault and the hero game modes, covering both the star cards as well as just some general gameplay tips as well. So if that is what you guys are looking for in a hero guide, then make sure to drop a like on the video. Now, keep in mind that almost everything in this guide was tested in arcade, and while I'm 99% sure that all of these stats do transfer over to multiplayer, just bear in mind that there is always a chance that some stats actually may change from arcade to multiplayer. So if you see any stats that don't seem right, then that is most likely what's happened. So getting stuck into it, first off we're going to take a look at her base HP, and she does have the average health pool for a Saber user coming in at 750 HP. On top of that, she does also have 250 health regen as well, which again is pretty much the average for the Saber users. So you can go from 750 HP all the way down to 500 and still be able to regen all the way back to full health. Now, her weapon of choice is Anakin's iconic blue lightsaber, and I guess since at the time of this game launching she wasn't a full Jedi yet, her damage stats are actually a little bit on the lower side. She deals 120 damage per hit from the front and 140 damage per hit from behind, which is actually down there with the lowest damage of any Saber user in the game. And I believe she is also the only character who can't actually one-hit kill enemies from behind as well, although one of her abilities does grant an extra 10 damage per swing, so once you do equip that ability you can get those one-hit kills from behind. Now, she has a swing speed of 1.8 swings per second, which is pretty much the average speed for most Saber users in the game, so nothing too special there. Her lunge distance is what I'd class as a pretty far lunge. She seems to be able to move forward a good 2 to 3 meters at times when you've locked onto an enemy with the Saber, so that does at least make up a little bit for the lower damage output. As for her stamina pool, I have classed it as medium, as she can swing about 10 times before running out of stamina, and her blocking stamina is pretty much on par with most of the others as well. But like I said before, her middle ability, which I'll touch on in a second, does actually help her out with her stamina as well. Now, moving on to those abilities, and she does have a pretty solid set of abilities, all of which are pretty well suited for their own situations. Her L1 ability is called Dash Strike, which has a 10-second cooldown, and exactly as it sounds, this one just allows Rey to charge forward with her Saber, damaging anyone that she hits along the way, as well as knocking them to the ground. It deals 130 damage per hit, and it does also knock down enemy heroes as well, at least when they're not blocking. This ability is really good for clearing out hallways or objectives without giving too much time for the enemies to react, and it's also great for knocking down some of the tougher enemies like reinforcements, giving you the chance to take them out without them being able to do too much about it. Its only real downside is that it does leave you open to attack if the enemy can land their shots, and like I said, it can also be blocked by enemy Saber users. Moving on to her L1 R1 ability, this one is called Insight, and it has a very fast 10-second cooldown, which for what this ability does is almost criminal. This ability allows Rey to reveal all nearby enemies to both herself and her teammates, and because of that alone, I would honestly say that this is one of, if not the best ability in the game. On top of that though, it does also give her 50% stamina drain reduction, meaning your stamina lasts twice as long, and it also gives you an extra 10 damage per hit, leaving her to deal 130 from the front and 150 from behind. This ability should be used as often as you can pretty much, and like I said, it genuinely has the ability to completely turn the tide of a game in your team's favour. As for its weaknesses, I honestly can't think of anything that I consider a weakness, but let me know down in the comments if you guys do think it has any weaknesses. Moving on now to the R1 ability, this one is her Mind Trick ability, which has a 20-second cooldown. Now, this one causes anyone within its area of effect to be immobilized, inverting their controls for 5 seconds, and also causing them to not be able to turn around, or at least not very fast anyway. This ability is awesome in GA when you're flanking a group of enemies. You can pretty much hit them all with the Mind Trick, and then since you're behind them, you'll pretty much be able to take them all out with no trouble at all. And the same can be said with heroes, as once you're behind them, they are in a lot of trouble. Its only real weakness is that it does have a relatively slow animation, which can often leave you very open to attack. So that is it for all of her base stats and abilities. Now we're going to move on to some of the more important stuff, starting with her best star cards for Galactic Assault. Now obviously it really does come down to personal preference, so these definitely aren't the only cards that you can use, but these are just the cards that I think are the most important and most well suited cards for Galactic Assault. So the first card I'm going to recommend is her Focused Sight card, and this one makes her insight last up to 7 seconds longer when fully maxed. With the initial 10 seconds of the ability, this takes it up to 17 seconds, and with only a 10-second cooldown, that means it's available for almost 2/3 of the time that you're alive. Which, for how good the ability is, it is definitely a very beastly card. The next card I'd recommend using is her Damaging Strike card, and this one makes her Dash Strike deal an extra 30% of the base damage, compounding with each enemy that you hit. This allows for a one-hit kill on all troopers other than the heavy, and if you can chain a few together in one use, then you can even take out heavies in one hit as well, which is definitely very satisfying to say the least. Now for the third card, I tend to actually use her Resilient Dash card to go in tandem with that last card, and this one essentially just gives damage reduction while using her Dash Strike. Like I said earlier, sometimes you can take a bit of damage when you use this ability, and so by using this card in tandem with the last one, you're turning a pretty decent ability into probably one of the more deadly abilities in the game. Now, the last card I'm going to mention is probably to replace that last card if you don't feel like you want to use that one, and this one is the Balanced Star card. This one gives Rey an extra dodge at the cost of a bit less stamina, which for me personally isn't worth it, as quite frankly I'm not often the best at managing my stamina. But if you are good at managing your stamina, then this extra dodge can surprisingly be super helpful in pretty much every single area. It helps a lot with surviving against groups of enemies, as you can kind of dodge around quickly and take enemies out without taking too much damage, and it also helps against enemy heroes as well in a 1v1 battle. Plus, if you are in trouble, that extra dodge can also help a lot to escape and regen some health, so it is a bit situational, but it can be very decent nonetheless. Now, like I said, these are the main cards that I would personally recommend using. However, if you do disagree, then definitely feel free to let us all know down in the comments section, as there really is no right or wrong when it comes to something like choosing star cards. So now moving on to some of the best maps to choose Rey on when you're playing Galactic Assault, and the top 3 that I've picked are Endor, Naboo and Tatooine. All of these maps suit her insight ability so well. Having the ability to see the enemy team and set up accordingly is so useful, and even though defending is generally pretty hard as a hero compared to attacking, insight makes Naboo and Tatooine so much easier to play, and even though personally I suck on defensive maps, Naboo and Tatooine have actually provided some of my biggest streaks so far with Rey. Now obviously this doesn't mean that these are the only 3 maps you should choose her on. She's awesome on literally every single map in the game, but these are probably just the 3 that I'd personally choose her on the most, so if you're not too sure, then these are probably a good starting point. Now, as for some tips for Galactic Assault, and like I've said a few times now, that Insight ability is, in my opinion, the best ability in the game, and due to how often you can use it, I cannot recommend enough to actually just use it whenever you get the chance. Obviously, if you're pretty far away from the action, then maybe just hang on to it until you are a little bit closer to the fight, but if you're even relatively close to the action, using this as much as you can is not only a lifesaver to yourself, but also to the rest of your team as well. I can't tell you guys how many times with other characters that I'll lose a heap of health to only like 1 or 2 unexpected enemies who maybe flank me or just somehow sneak up without me knowing. But when you are playing as Rey and you have this ability active, it's almost impossible to not be aware of enemies so long as you do keep an eye on that minimap. Not only can it keep you much safer, but it can also allow you to just plan your attacks much easier too, because when you know where all the enemies are, you can get into the best positions without putting yourself in any danger, as well as just having an advantage on your enemies when it comes to your awareness. One thing that I didn't mention is that Insight does actually take you off the minimap while it's active too, which is actually so much more useful than it sounds, as you can quickly disappear, sneak around your enemies and then get a jump on them before they even have the slightest idea of where you've gone. Essentially, to tie it all up in regards to Insight, the more you use it, the more you'll know where your enemies are, and the more you know where the enemies are, the better you can plan out your positioning and attacks. We all know that better preparation and planning always means better results, and so when you leave less stuff to chance and prepare for your fights a little better, it's instantly going to help you guys with your survivability. Now, another quick tip I have for you guys is that rather than cancelling your dash strike with a dodge or just pressing L1 again, you should almost always swing your saber instead, as it actually makes it almost like a one-hit kill if you do time it right. I'll show you guys on screen exactly what I mean. If you wait until right when the hit marker pops up from the dash strike and then just instantly swing your saber, you pretty much just quickly deal that extra saber damage, resulting in a much faster and safer kill. If you do use it against groups of enemies, then sure, keep running through them all and dodge away to cancel it, but if you are just in a 1v1 or even a 1v2, always try and get in the habit of swinging as soon as you hit that enemy, and you'll get a whole lot more kills by doing so. Rey can often be a little bit harder to get used to. Her base stats are a tad lower than the rest, and she doesn't also have as many deadly abilities as some of the others. But like I said, if you just make the most of that Insight ability, play the map smarter when you can see those enemies, and all around just play a bit more of a smarter game, then overall you guys should definitely improve your gameplay with Rey. So that is going to be it for the Galactic Assault tips. Now we're going to move on to some tips for the Hero vs Villain game mode. So starting off with the best star cards, and these first 2 are the same as the GA cards, but there are 2 others that I'd recommend after those ones. The first card is again the Focus Sight card, which extends Insight's active time, and with how good Insight is, I'm sure you guys know how useful this is for HVV, especially with the added damage and the lower stamina drain. The second card is the Damaging Strike card again, and like I said earlier, this one is kind of self-explanatory. More damage is always going to be helpful, especially against enemy heroes. Now, as for the third card, again, this one is the Balance card that was the optional one for GA, and in HVV, this card is actually beastly because, like I said, that third dodge helps so much against not only Saber users, but also enemy Blaster heroes as well, so this one is definitely a solid choice. If you don't want to use any of those cards, then the Opportunist card is another good option, which just increases the damage dealt against enemies hit by a Mind Trick. With just how useful Mind Trick can be in these modes, getting even more added damage from it is obviously even more useful. Again, I'd still recommend testing each and every card for yourself because they do all suit everyone differently, but if you're not too sure what to choose, then these are definitely a good place to start. Now, moving on to some tips for the hero game modes, and if I'm going to be honest, pretty much everything I said about Insight and Dash Strike can be transferred straight from the GA tips, so I won't cover those too much, but I will just touch on a few more quick tips. Obviously, Rey does deal a bit less damage compared to the other heroes, so you do have to be careful going head to head with enemies, but there are a few workarounds that can get you some quick damage and give you an advantage in those battles. Try and remember that Mind Trick restricts enemies from turning around, and since you can't block from behind, if you hit them with Mind Trick and then attack from behind, they really can't do anything other than dodge or jump. A really good combo that I've found if you do have all the cards equipped that I just mentioned is to hit them with the Mind Trick, and if you can, equip Insight. Get behind them, get in 1 or 2 quick hits, dodge backwards, and then hit them with a Dash Strike and a quick attack like I said earlier, and with the right cards equipped, this can actually deal up to 650 damage within maybe 3 or 4 seconds, although it is much easier said than done. All they really need to do to stop that attack is dodge or jump, but in saying that, if you play it smart and try to take their dodge into account, you can still pull that combo off and almost take 3/4 of their health in one single combo. So try and give that one a shot if you do get a chance. It is very situational, but it is insane when it actually works. Now, as for some characters to look out for, Vader, Dooku and Kylo are the 3 main characters that I think can cause you some trouble. Vader is simply just a tank, and with his insane health and damage compared to Rey's lower damage, you do have to play it pretty smart to beat a good Vader player, so definitely don't get into a swing spam battle against Vader because you will lose that battle 9 times out of 10. Dooku is pretty much the same as Vader in that regard. His health is decent, but his damage is actually the best in the game in a short period of time, so again, just be very careful around Dooku. As for Kylo, it's mainly his ability combo that can mess you up. In a 1v1, he's not too hard to handle, but if he catches you off guard, then he can definitely take you out very quickly. If you just try and keep an eye on these guys, as well as implementing all the tips that I've just mentioned, then you should have no worries with Rey in both Heroes vs Villains and Hero Showdown. But anyway guys, that is going to be it for our Rey Hero Guide. Hopefully some of these tips did help you guys out, and if they did, then make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 videos or live streams. Feel free to comment down below which character you would like to see next. I'm planning on doing both a Bosk and a Grievous guide soon, but if you have any other preferences, then let me know and I will do my best to get onto those as fast as possible. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.